Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. And friends, if you've been feeling a little bit stuck in your work or in your life, let me just say it right up front. This episode is for you. Now, there are very few people at this point who have been on the Simplifiers podcast as much as my special guest, and there's one very clear reason for it. The girl knows her stuff, and she has written a book that is just recently released called Deep Grooves. And what we are going to dive deep into is understanding how and simplifying how to get unstuck in life. Her name is Lisa Linfield, and after a successful 20-year corporate career, she stepped off the ladder to start 3 businesses where her goal is really to change the lives of people through financial freedom. That work has crystallized one central belief. We all get stuck in deep grooves of the way things are because we never were taught how to change our lives for the better. She's a board-certified financial planner and has set a goal to teach 1 million women about money through her podcast and her blog, Working Women's Wealth, as well as online courses, books, and keynote speaking. So I'd like to welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, Lisa Linfield. Hello, friend.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here, and well done on publishing and releasing your very first of, I know, will be many, many books. That is
Thank you.
a huge feat. And, where I'd like to begin is, you have 20 plus years of experience in financial management, wealth management, all of that. Why do you believe that the first book should be focused around mindset? Why start there?
The more you work with money, the more you realize that the spreadsheet, the investments, is such a tiny little bit of this game.
Yeah.
I can have 5 clients come in with exactly the same situation on paper, but what is actually happening and what goes on in their lives are completely different. And 90% of it is around managing behavior, managing the way we think, And I think, personally, 3 years ago, when I started this journey of jumping off the corporate ladder and starting my own business, I absolutely believed that the hardest thing for me would be around the normal things to do with starting a business and, the investments in global markets.
Yep.
But the journey that has paled in comparison with the journey that I've been on. And it has been the most phenomenal learning journey. But I realized that when I was in corporate, I was stuck in a very big groove of fitting into the tribe of corporate. And that along the way, after 20 years, I had lost so much of my own thoughts and views. If you're going to survive in a corporate, you're going to have to blend in. You're going to have to mold into the average or the norm or the behavior of the tribe.
Right.
And when I suddenly started by myself, and especially when I started my podcast, it began a process of finding my voice. What did I think? What were my views? Stop being the good little girl. And then so much around having to get unstuck and overcome these patterns that were keeping me stuck that might have served me in corporate but didn't serve me at all in having my own business. So as I was mindful of both my own journey and my client's journey, it came together when I realized that in actual fact, there is nothing you can change in your life if you're not prepared to tackle your thinking, because your thinking determines your behavior.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true. It's the old saying of, it's not about what happens to you. It's about how you react, how you perceive what has happened to you. Just as you said, if on paper, all the assets and liabilities are exactly the same. It's basic math, really. But if you are in a fog, or if you are completely jumbled or feeling like a victim, you're going to approach the challenge completely different than somebody that goes, okay, well, we can figure this out, and I've got an open mindset. Right?
Absolutely. And 2 people who earn the same income have completely different wealth. So what drives that? Are you a person who gives away money? Are you a person who spends money? Are you a person who saves it so much that you can't actually break free of a prison you've created for yourself, you know? And I think that's a problem. Two of us can go through it doesn't matter whether it's COVID-19, it doesn't matter whether it's whatever it is. Two of us can go through the same experience and our perception of it will be completely different. And that's because we have patterns, and these patterns help us because they short circuit everyday life to make it easier and less energy to deal with. But in reality, they can also hurt us and they can harm our growth when we don't stop to actually step back and look at them and say, does it really serve me to think this, to believe this, to move forward with this pattern in my life?
Right. Is it getting me closer or further away from what it is I actually want or how I want to feel as well, right?
Absolutely. And also so much of our life is unconscious. Our brain develops habits our brain uses the most energy in our whole body. And so it develops habits and these shortcuts of thinking to enable us to be on autopilot so we don't exhaust ourselves. Having said that, autopilot is not the place where our best life lives. Autopilot is comfortable. Autopilot is safe. Autopilot is cozy, but it's not where our best life lives.
So in the book, it's broken out in 3 sections. And the first section is really encompassing what you call, in air quotes, the truth. Why do you believe the truth that's out there in the world is not actually the truth? And why is this the best place to start at first?
Every behavior that we do stems from thinking. Yep. And part of the thinking that we have is that we have the truth that surrounds a certain situation. The challenge is our truth comes from many sources, and I call it the world out there. The world out there tells us from the minute we're born what the truth is. And that truth comes from our parents and family. It comes from that teacher who shouted at us when we were 6 years old and called us lazy only because she hadn't slept the night before with her newborn baby. It comes from an 8-year-old friend who told us that we were fat and stupid, or some magazine or social media, or a 26-year-old boss in our first job when he himself hadn't solved the world, and said that we would never get anywhere in life. And our brain just layers these, what I call truths in inverted commas, into a set of shortcuts, I am statements that frame the way we perceive the world. So then you end up saying, I'm fat, I'm lazy, I'm stupid, I'll never amount to anything. Because these people in the world out there have at some stage put that input into us. And it might have had a certain grain of truth. You might have at that particular point not jumped out of your chair when the teacher told you to get up and she said you're lazy, and you believe that that is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The challenge is the world out there also tells us what the perfect life involves. It involves a Ferrari, a drop-dead gorgeous body, if it has to, 2.5 kids, a golden retriever, and,
a white picket fence. Yes.
Absolutely. And the world out there tells you what happiness is. But the reality is there is absolutely no part in that story that is a truth, the real truth. One of the great things I love in life is the fact that the science tells us that the body of medical knowledge doubles. And when it was 1950, it used to take 50 years to double. When it was 1980, it took 7 years to double. And if you started med school in 2010, by the time you finished med school, it had doubled 3 times. Wow. Right now in 2020, they say the body of medical knowledge doubles every 3 years. Now, I went to med school. Logic and proven science was theoretically the only way to go. And we believed it as the truth.
Right.
So even if you don't buy into or subscribe to the fact that all those other people could have been wrong about you, just the rate knowledge is multiplying in this current information age shows us that the facts that we thought were the whole truth and nothing but the truth no longer are, And I think for me, that's why it's really important, because if our behavior stems from our thinking, the question is, how accurate is our thinking?
Right.
And once we are even slightly, remotely open to the fact that that teacher when we were 6-year-old might not have been correct. And those friends who told you that you weren't worth anything when you were 9 years old might not have been correct. Even if you're not open to that, the minute you accept the fact that your thinking might not be 100% correct, you open yourself to the growth journey. You open yourself to that ability to step outside and say, where does this thinking come from?
Yeah.
And is it really the truth?
Mm.
And that, for me, has been the journey that has been the most fulfilling journey over the last 3 years.
Oh, I can completely echo that. I feel like in the last couple of years, I too have been on a bit of an excavation, if you will, of really like just going back and saying, well, hang on, I do have some of these deep rooted belief systems. I like to call them anchors that, at some point did serve me and got me to kind of where I am now. But, is it still serving me into where I'm headed next? And, I also have. I have empathy for the people who have said horrible things to me in the past, whether they knew they were horrible or at the moment, or they were just having a horrible day themselves and I just happened to be the closest thing to take it out on. It is so wild, though, when you mentioned the 6-year-old. Yeah, I remember some things that some people said to me at 6 that I still hold on to at age 42 now, And, I think a lot of times the brokenness cycle continues and it gets handed down from one generation to another. And, I just took a personal vow as I've done this excavation of like, well, hang on. I have a choice. I don't have to continue the brokenness cycle. I don't have to hand this down to my children or my coworkers or my friends or otherwise. It is a real liberating place to go, oh, okay, these pieces that I thought were foundational and defined sort of the boundaries, if you will, of my life and my identity have some wiggle room. And that's where it gets exciting. It's like, oh, well, this changes everything, right?
Absolutely. And I talk about in the book how one of my greatest teachers in this journey has been my 12-year-old daughter. Watching her go through that stage where girls can be really mean has been so liberating for me because I get to observe myself through this position. I get to see the same things happening. But what I get to do now is offer her a different viewpoint. That saying of hurting people hurt others.
Yeah.
I see it so often because the girl that has been so mean to her yesterday is the girl whose parents are going through a terrible divorce and whose dad is hitting her mother. Mm-hmm. So yes, she comes home and takes it out of my daughter. And no, that by no means makes it okay.
Yeah.
But I at least allow that perspective and my learning journey to help Jess. And what I say to her is, don't wait until you're 45 years old to learn this lesson. Yeah. See it now, understand that hurting people hurt. And the quicker you can do that, the quicker it allows you to reframe how you perceive that truth. Is it a truth that comes from a person who themselves is hurting and so is kicking the cat on the way past? Or is it a truth that really is a truth? And I think one of the real challenges in life is that if you think about how our brains evolved with the emotional and fight or flight as the most primitive part of our brain. Yeah. The top part of our brain, which has that logical, that override functionality, is only fully developed when we're 25 years old. And if it's only fully developed at 25 years old, my 8-year-old self or my 12-year-old daughter doesn't have the ability to override that emotion that comes with someone telling you that you're stupid or useless or mean or nasty or horrible, And so as an adult, what's been fascinating as I go through and I went through and write books and this book and I saw myself as both a writer and as an adult experience what this little human of Lisa, the little human, went through. And what was amazing to me is despite even being able to write a new interpretation of the story, how much that deep emotional hurt still sits there in the story. And I think that is the real challenge, is that this thing is an onion. This life we live is an onion. And the patterns that keep us stuck in these deep grooves of behavior, we're going to have to keep working at them at different stages all the time, because I kind of think you get taken to a level and you can master that level. But life, God, the universe only gives how much you can cope with at that time. And then 2 years later, when you think, oh my goodness, this thing's so in my rearview mirror, something happens. And it comes again. And you just go through and you peel this onion until your groove shifts and changes over time. But it's hard. I mean, friend, this journey of life is hard.
Yeah.
At least if we believe there's wiggle room in our thinking, then we can start to create and vision a new way forward.
Well, and then that's what I think is so exciting, and why I feel like being a podcaster is such a privilege for myself, is that I get to read incredible books like yourself that you've written, and I feel like it's one of the puzzle pieces. It's not all the puzzle pieces, but it's one. And I go, oh, well, that changes that little thing that there, which then ripples out and changes other pieces of my own journey of self-understanding and actualization. So let's define what is a deep groove, and then let's start to actually dive deep. How do we define them, and then how do we climb out of them?
So for me, I'm a person who sees in pictures, and I was blessed enough to find the most amazing illustrator who can actually try and make my brain come alive to other people. So the way I see this life is that we go along this journey, and the first time we experience anything, it's like water going off the land. And then as this water comes further, and as this thing happens again and again, it slowly creates a river. And over time, it creates a groove. And over time, it creates a canyon, a Grand Canyon. And I see that as our behavior patterns more and more and more, and these patterns keep us stuck, it becomes this canyon of almost comfort, relationship that we fall into. And it happens with every area of our life. We are, to some of our friends, we're the funniest person that exists. In other friend circles, we're the serious one. We're the one they come to when things happen. Yeah. In your family, you might be 70 years old, but still the baby. These patterns or grooves that we fall into from a relationship perspective, from a life perspective, and then from a habit perspective, shape our path. And as I mentioned, they become so unconscious that they just are the way. One of the things that I laugh at myself is when I think about my night routine, it always is the fact that I put my kids to bed, and I turn right and I head and make myself a cup of coffee, get some dark chocolate, jump on the couch, turn on the TV. It's just a habit. It's a groove, and it's a deep groove because I just do it on automatic pilot all the time.
Yeah.
Now, these patterns and these grooves are fine when we're in that comfortable spot in life. But when we want to make a change, when we want to become a better version of ourselves, or when something is really triggering us and we want to step back and say, okay, hold on. What really is going on here?
Yeah.
We have to really get into the perspective of being able to have a tool and a toolkit that gets us out of these deep grooves.
And so what I hear in all of that is a deep groove could be so deeply entrenched that it becomes part of our identity, it becomes part of our habits and routines and rituals. But then I also imagine if you take that analogy and lay it over a place where you're really challenged or triggered, something is horribly wrong, or there is an imbalance of control or freedom or what have you. Could there also be a level of victimhood in this, of like, oh, well, I'm powerless. I am stuck in this groove. I can't do anything. This is because she did this to me, blah, 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 blah. Is there also an element of that in this?
So you're correct in both ways. I call it the zoomed in state. Often we are so zoomed into our own situation that we can't even see we're in a groove. It just feels like normal life. And the best way to relate to that is a corporate culture. When we first hit a company, we think, oh my goodness gracious me, this place is nuts. I'm like this little pink human in a purple space, and it's really that kind of frog jumping into the hot water stuff. But you talk to us 3 years later, and we're as purple as they come. We kind of get into the groove of that culture. Corporate culture is a groove like any form of relationships, and it has a way of being. But we get so stuck inside it that we forget that we ever found it a foreign place. So that zoomed in state is absolutely crucial. Whatever the way we think about that state, whether the corporate culture is one of everybody else is to blame, or whether your natural state in a particular situation is one of reactiveness. There's been a painful relationship, and the way you see it is that person, she is always behaving this way. You might not have that same groove of pattern of thinking. I mean, there are some people who think that the world is to blame for everything, but you might be a perfectly healthily functioning relational being with your 80 other relationships in your life, but with this one person, you just can't see any other thing than besides the fact that she is the cause of everything. And then what you need to do is realize that there is a step-by-step process that you can take yourself through. Firstly, to recognize what is the pattern, what is the trigger. Secondly, to then plan your way out of it.
Yeah, so it sounds like to me also that when you have a vision of victimhood and you feel like you are completely powerless, that's also just a story. You're never in a place fully where you don't have a choice, right?
Completely. And, so there's a process that I've developed. I call it the reverse thinking stack. And this tool has short-circuited my times when I get stuck. That time when you think, oh my goodness, when I'm so triggered, usually it would take me a long time to get through this. This process, I get through this quickly. And effectively, it breaks down into 3 steps. The first thing is to say, what causes me to feel like I do now? And there are 2 elements of that. There's always a trigger. Either you just bumped into that person or something happened that triggered you. And then the next thing I do is say, what is the earliest event that it felt like this, or a similar event? Because there is always something. I was coaching a person the other day, and she was talking to me about her struggle of adjusting in COVID-19. And I said, when last did you feel like this? And she said, when I first started my business and I felt so out of control. And I said, and what happened then? And she said, it took me about a month and then it was fine. So I said, so what makes you think this is going to be any different? And it was an aha. But we first start off with what causes me to feel like that. And we look at those 2 things. And then we say, what's actually going on right now? And here the most important thing is that difference between good reasons and real reasons. And good reasons are the stories we tell ourselves and the story we tell everybody else out there when we're bitching to our friends. Real reasons. That's where the change comes. And I always say the difference between good reasons and real reasons is treating the symptom, not the cause. It's putting cream on a sore ankle instead of getting it operated on and a nail put through it because it's broken, And so when we look at that second stage of what's going on right now, the first thing we start with is assumptions. What is the story I'm telling and what am I assuming? I'm assuming that she's always out to get me. I'm assuming that she wants my job. I'm assuming that so what are those assumptions? And how then does that make me feel? And the problem is, Brené Brown talks about the fact that we have a common language of 6 feelings, when in actual fact, they're close to 40. And it's the starting to re-educate ourselves about, am I feeling anger or am I actually feeling defensiveness or shame or fear that she's after my job? And then we say, okay, what is the instinct? And I love this one because the instinct is always fight, flight, or freeze. But I love the fact when I always do this. So if I've just been really triggered and it's a massive issue in my life, I'll do this there and then, and I'll do it like a week later. And in my first instinct is to beat the living daylights out of someone.
Yeah.
And then that fight or flight changes, or those feelings and those assumptions, they all gradually change. These things are dynamic in us. We're dynamic human beings. And the last thing in the what's going on with me right now is around the I am statements that I'm saying. I am less than her. I am always going to screw up. I am. What are those core identity statements that are framing the way you see the situation? And those are crucial, especially when you're trying to change behavior. You know, when I was trying to change my exercise routine, I worked out that my core I am statements was I am not a regular exerciser and I am not a dieter. And when those two core statements existed in my life, I was never, ever going to be able to stick to anything. You know, your subconscious brain processes at 11 million bits a second, and your conscious brain shows us at 50. So in the war between 11 million and 50, which is going to win? So if your I am statements are wrong, you are never going to change this. When I started a business, my huge part of my identity was I am not an entrepreneur. I am a corporate person.
Yeah.
Now, how am I ever going to have a successful business if fundamentally my 11 million are telling me that this isn't my shizzle?
Right.
It doesn't matter how many my 50 try, they're never going to win that battle.
Right. And your brain, if that is a core, deeply rooted belief, then your brain is going to look for the data points that prove it. Like, see, I told you. Look at that. Oh, there's another point.
Absolutely. And understanding the brain science behind all of this. So whilst I'm very much rooted in change, which some people believe is the la-la side of life and mindfulness and all of that kind of stuff, I'm fundamentally analytical. And my whole premise in this book is once you work out the brain science behind all of these things, then you can work out how to short circuit it. And once you become conscious that your brain is only picking up the data that justifies how mean she is, how nasty she is, or how every business fails, you will then can you open yourself up to the fact that you could be looking at different data points. My dad lost his business when I was at university. It was a highly traumatic event, highly traumatic for all of us. And so fundamentally, when I started this business, I had to get over the I am statement of I'm a corporate girl. I'm not an entrepreneur. And I deeply believe that businesses fail and then they cause massive carnage in a family. And so, you know, that's been a process that I still have to kind of go through and go, oh, okay. In actual fact, I'm self-sabotaging because these identity statements are at the core.
Right.
But once you get to that position of saying, firstly, what causes me to feel like this? And secondly, what's really going on right now? You need to move through. You need to get to the stage where you say, okay, well, how am I going to do things differently? And for me, there are two elements in there. The first one is wisdom. And the second one is action. And when I talk about wisdom, whether you talk about the universe, whether you talk about things your grandma told you, whether you just talk about that small voice inside you that tells you the right thing to do, it's always good to connect back to that. You know, if you've ever done a values mapping session for your life, if you've ever done a values mapping session for your business, what would wisdom tell you? And one of the things that I can tell you about when I do this, when the stuff has hit the fan, the first thinking stack that I do is full of fight, flight. What would wisdom say? Wisdom would say, you know, bugger it, move on, you know, all of this
you're
kind
a failure. Pack it in now.
She's banana, you know, all of that kind of stuff. But it's only in the quietness of life that then you can access that wisdom that says, hey, maybe there's a different thing. Maybe I need to call her up and have coffee with her. Maybe I'm believing not all businesses fail. So therefore, in actual fact, wisdom would say, you know, that is something that is part of the past. Your future looks nothing like your future looks nothing like your dad's past, you know. And these stories that we can tell ourselves when we are calm and quiet, that's when wisdom gets to speak.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the stories and the I am statements, I think also probably come from a good place deep down inside. It's your fear kind of helping you play safe. It's like, oh, I don't want you to get rejected or to fail or fall flat on your face or break your nose. Like it's trying to keep you safe. But the truth is if you are trying to achieve a goal that, say, for example, become a published author, and if you've never written a book before, it requires a leap into a whole new you and a whole new way of not only self-identifying, but then showing how you show up in the world as well, that requires you to release those deep grooves and move up and into this new reality.
Absolutely. And it's why I say it's hugely important to understand the brain.
Yeah.
The brain developed in a time where staying safe inside the tribe meant that the species survived.
Right.
The brain is structured to keep you safely in the tribe.
Yeah.
Publishing a book takes you outside the tribe, and means that you can put, in my case, my heart and soul out there, and the lions can devour me.
Yeah.
And that's the reality, is that if you understand that the brain, that's the biggest portion of the brain and the oldest portion of the brain's only function is to keep you safe inside the tribe. Then you can have a lot more grace with yourself to understand that fears was designed with the purpose of keeping you inside the tribe. But these days, out there are no real lions. There are our fears, and they are overcoming those fears. But that some of those protection mechanisms are outdated in our modern world. And when you are able to look at them from that step back position, you're then able to say, hey, thank you for protecting me, but we're going to do this anyway.
Yeah.
It's that book that I love, that Susan Jeffers, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Yeah. I respect you, Lisa, inside Lisa. I respect you for that fear. I thank you for that fear, but we're going to publish this book anyway. Yeah. And if the lions devour us, then they devour us.
So be it. You'll learn a good lesson. And next time you put yourself out there, you'll do things a little bit differently, which I think dovetails into part 2 of your book really nicely. So you talk about signposts to your best life. How do you begin to define those signposts? And talk to us a little bit about how you would draw a vision towards the journey that you're going to need to take to that next major goal, whether it's writing a book or launching a new business or starting a family even.
So this has been the most fascinating thing for me. When you're a financial advisor, your entire job is around helping this person get to the next stage of life. I can count on my hand the number of clients who have a clear view of what that next stage is. Yeah. And it made me realize that as human beings, our goal setting is almost non-existent. It's like we've lost the ability to dream and envision what it is out there. Most times, most people default to the vision of retirement they saw in their parents. Yeah. Now, when I did this exercise with my husband, his parents came from England, from rural England. My parents come from the city. My parents' view of retirement, which was my view of retirement, is you travel the world and you give it stick when you're retired. And his was, you're at home, chilling on the couch, soccer, all of that good stuff, And it just amazes me as I do this exercise how little we look. And then when you say to people, okay, do the exercise and articulate what you want, they say, I've got no idea. And that's why we need signposts. And the first signpost we look at is the signpost from our past, because those point to the things that we enjoy, the things we don't enjoy. And one of the exercises that we do, particularly in terms of professional, so I see it a lot in terms of people wanting to change career or start their own business or things like that, is we look at those signposts from the past. And in my own case, one of the things I realized is that the environments I thrive in most are environments that have diversity. Yeah. Different ages, different backgrounds, different goals, different objectives. And so I thrive to create diversity as a requirement in my going forward. The next set of signposts that we look at is the signposts that are right now. And that's when we look at those things like fear. That's when we look at those things like what drives you nuts, what's irritated, because those point to things in our life that are not quite right now. And when we do that job to excavate deep down and work out what's wrong, we can then work out what it is that we need to stick away from, you know. The next set of signposts are what I call signposts from the outside. It comes from that the view of you can't read the label from inside the jar, you know. And so sometimes, and an exercise I take people through in my Brave to Be Free course is around this whole thing of, so what's your superpower?
Yeah.
And people will always respond blankly to that question. And we do this exercise, and some people find it fine. Other people fight me like right heading, you know, to the grave. And they say, I'm never doing this, but they do it. And you email 12 people and you say, what is my superpower? And it's such a funny thing. You don't need to explain that. You don't need to try and explain to you. People will come back and say, this is your superpower. Yeah. And it's fascinating because for some people, they show up differently. So all 13 are different responses. But in other people, it's very clear. And the thing is, it doesn't matter what you do in life. But if you anchor it in your superpower, you will always be that step ahead of other people. Yeah. You'll always have that extra sense of fulfillment. And then lastly, it's that signpost from wisdom. That still small voice, that everyday guiding, that thing in your gut that says, hey, I was born to be so much more. Yeah. Or, hey, I've always wanted to do this. And one of the things that I loved was I was listening to a podcast interview with a guy called Waleed Azami. And he talks about a discussion that he was having with his friend, Jamie King. And the thing that struck me was this whole concept that we are the only species that trains our young not to listen to their gut. We train our young to listen to logic. We train our young to prize analysis and all of that kind of stuff. We don't train our young to hone instinct, to hone that sense of gut, that wisdom that lives inside us. And the last step is around unconstrained dreaming. And when I take my clients through this in Brave to Be Free, one of the things that I, you know, as a corporate person, it was create a vision for your life. And I talked about permission to dream and the feedback that came from everywhere around how wonderful it was to have permission to do unconstrained dreaming. No buts, no logic, no thinking about the kids or how would I do this or none of that kind of real life stuff that we put it. People have lost the ability to dream unconstrained, selfish, wonderful dreams, and listen to that gut of, you know, if I could do anything, I would stop my corporate career and become an artist. Yeah. You know, people don't even give voice to that stuff because it's just logical, it's impractical. How would I finance things? All of that. And once you start putting all these signposts together and putting in that dream with no buts in them, it starts to create amazing ability to make these plans happen. And that's a part of my job I love most, is the ability to say, but why can't you? And why can't you achieve that? You know, you don't know, it's not going to happen in a day, but why can't you work in 5 years to achieve that?
And what I appreciate about that the most is whenever I have felt stuck in my life, it's because I didn't have a clear vision of what it is I wanted next or where I wanted to go. I feel like I was just so focused on, look at the muck here. Like, I don't know about this. I don't know how to fix this. But it's in fact, like you say, zooming out of the muck, the present, and setting that vision for the future actually helps you and you know, with those signposts along the way, start to create that vision for that journey ahead. You may not know all the answers, right?
No.
And I mean, I can almost guarantee you won't know all the answers right at the beginning. No. However, when you know where you'd like to go, even if it's a sprinkle of a vision, what happens for me is then all of a sudden hope comes into the equation. And when you cultivate hope, it's like a chemical reaction. It starts to fizzle and come to life. And that's where you start to get those sparks of ideas of, hey, I should call Lisa, or maybe I could collaborate with Marie, or maybe Danielle is the person that would be great for this next project.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it comes back to that whole thing of this amazing little piece of our brain called the reticular activating system.
Yeah.
And it's that thing we were talking about that helps us to see all the data that backs up why so-and-so is not so great.
Right.
But it's also what makes you see if you're going to buy a yellow beetle bug, there are going to be yellow beetle bugs everywhere.
Right.
The minute you can have a clear vision, your brain starts seeking opportunities. It's scanning all the time. The thing's function is to find an answer to the problem you're putting into it. And then those opportunities start coming. And you start to see data points of how possible that thing actually is, And that for me is the liberation of this journey. That for me is the ability. And it doesn't mean that tomorrow you're suddenly on a different path. It just means that you start to see the things. And people will say things just started falling into place. And it wasn't like, no, that's not some magic kind of woo that happens. It's the fact that your brain starts to shift into the art of the possible. Mm-hmm. Not this real constraint of today's everyday improbable stuff.
And that's it. That's the secret. So it's not that the world outside has all of a sudden magically changed and aligned for you. It's you and your perception of what's happening in your life and in the world and how you live that has changed. And that's everything. That literally is this. Fast forward to this bit of the podcast, listen from this point forward. No, it's like literally that's the most important point.
Absolutely.
So the part 3 of the book really then dives into what you call step change success. Like, okay, and now what? And what I would like to say on that really quick is just hands down, buy the book, because this is going to lead you through simple, practical ways to really then start to take action towards your best life, whatever that looks like for you, and transition into and step up into that as well. So, yeah, final thoughts there.
So, the problem for me is I'm highly practical. I'm an analytical, practical doer. And so for me, like, whilst the thinking is the most important piece of the book, for me, the question is, how do I actually get this stuff done? And the first place always to start on what I call the rocket fuel is around getting very clear on why you need to make whatever this change is. And in actual fact, when I work with people on this, another very important thing is the why not. And to know in life, you need many different whys.
Yeah.
When it comes to, in my world, why do you need to start saving for retirement? Well, one of the biggest reasons is, well, why not? If you don't start saving for retirement, you're going to be dependent on your children. You're going to be living a tiny life, and you're going to be worrying about how you afford to pay the heating.
Yeah.
And that why not can be completely, like, really, really important. But there are also different whys about why you should also be saving. And the other why is because, you know what? At the end of the year, me and my family, we're going on this fantastic holiday. It's going to be amazing. So you need different whys. And that is, for me, the rocket fuel.
Yeah.
And then there comes so many different other kind of tool sets in that toolkit. But one of the things that is really important is around the fact that all of the tools that are in that section talk to the fact that there are practical, science-based ways to make change stick quicker. And that is what all of the different, so there are many different things in there, but that's what it comes down to is understand how the brain works and then understand how you short circuit that. And also know that if your thinking is not aligned, your action, it doesn't matter how many steps you take, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So when you're starting to make some changes and you're feeling that those changes aren't coming, you've got to go back to your thinking. So for me, for 2.5 years, I said, I need to find people, I need to do more sales in my business to create and generate more leads.
Yeah.
And 2.5 years later, it still wasn't working. Then you go back into your thinking step, because it doesn't matter how many to-do lists are going to be. You've got to find out what are those root cause things that you're thinking that, my thinking is everyone's going to say no to me. Well, you're never going to act until you change that. So it's this loop of saying, okay, you got to first get the thinking right. Then you go and you do the action steps, make the changes you need. And if after 2-3 months, those changes aren't happening, you're not doing this new behavior you think, then you got to go back to that thinking. But I love the science because it gives us the shortcuts.
And, again, I think the key there is not just taking action, but taking the time to reflect and review what the lessons learned from either a success or a failure, quote unquote.
Absolutely.
Then deciding if you're going to do the same thing or adjust, refine, pivot, and try again. So again, I highly recommend checking out this book. You can find it anywhere where books are sold. It's called Deep Grooves, Overcoming Patterns That Keep You Stuck. And Lisa, you are just such a wealth and fountain of wisdom. I always love chatting with you. So thank you again so much for sharing all this in today's conversation. I know without a doubt that this is going to help hundreds of people around the world. So congratulations on this.
Thank you.
So I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask you. We ask everybody on the podcast. I've asked you these questions a couple of times, so let's take it a new time. Step 3. What's one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
So right at this point in time, I'm reading Rising Strong by Brené Brown. Because as you mentioned, launching your first book, and especially a book that's not on money but is on thinking and involves so many of my own personal stories, is terrifying. I feel like I'm putting my little heart out there and everyone's going to jump all over it. And the thing I love about Brené Brown's books is that at different parts of my journey, I've looked at different ones. And the one thing I know is I'm going to put this book out there and someone's going to jump all over me. So I need to strengthen myself. I need to know how I'm going to rise strong when that happens, because when you can go through the process of pre-envisioning it, it makes the whole thing much easier to do. So that's the book I'm reading at the moment.
Brilliant. Well, we'll link that one up in the show notes. And by the way, all the things we talked about in today's episode, you can find at thesimplifierspodcast.com. So tell us, who is one person in your network, someone you know personally, you just feel is up to brilliant things right now? Let's shine a spotlight on them. And who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast.
So one of my previous guests, Harriet Whaley-Cohen, and one of the things I do is after I have guests is I stay watching and interested in them because I'm always interviewing interesting people. And her mission in life is to simplify how you learn to love your body. That physical thing in life that we were given to journey with, the only thing besides your thoughts that you're with 24/7 is your body. And particularly as women, I find so many people are fighting with that thing that they have 24/7. Either it's their thoughts or it's their body. And so Harriet Whaley-Cohen, she's based in the UK, and I think she does just really a fantastic job at her vision in life, which is to transform the way women see their body. So she's a person I'd love to spotlight. It's completely different, not in my sphere of business, finance, and all that stuff. But we're whole beings. We're not separate, different human beings. And I think that she's doing remarkable work.
Brilliant. Well, we will definitely link up with her as well. So I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what are you grateful for today?
Besides dark chocolate, today I'm really grateful for the space that has come from from being in lockdown. To just be with my 3 girls and journey this life with them. I think so often we rush from one sport to another extramural to this, and holidays are about friends or travel or visiting or things like that. And I have just, been so grateful for this time. And what's funny about this time is that although we've spent 24 hours together for months now, what feels like months, my girls aren't fighting with each other. We're not fighting with them. I always, as a parent, say the word yet, but I think it's just that thing of just spending quality time together. So I am I am so grateful for this precious time with my girls.
And what an incredible perspective shift this is. If there was any opportunity in the pandemic at all, it's the ability for us on a global scale to shift our perspective on how much quality time we spend with our family and with our friends, and also with ourselves in self-reflection.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So you can find Lisa online, lisalinfield.com. I'll also put all the links for her social media accounts there so you can get connected with her and her team directly. Lisa, I have one final question for you, and it's this. Someone somewhere is listening to this episode right now. She is feeling very stuck, like not even the base level. She is utterly stuck, and it feels really hard, really scary, and there's no way of getting out of whatever it is. What's one thing that you would whisper into her ear right now just to encourage her in this moment?
I would encourage her that the answer to her stuckness, the wisdom of her stuckness, is inside her. She has everything she needs. She is the bravest, strongest human being. That's the way she was created. And I would give her one practical piece of advice, which is to just get out a pen and a piece of paper and start writing. And that process unlocks that deep wisdom inside us, that greatness that sits inside her. Because what seems to happen to anybody I suggest it to, but most important to myself, is the minute I start writing, the stuff flows out.
Yeah.
And it's one of the best, freest tools that anybody can ever explore. And that is the gift of journaling. And there's science behind it and all that other stuff, but most importantly, it's a process that unlocks that wisdom inside you to be able to start seeing the way forward.
And the answers are already inside you right now.
Oh,
yeah.
All there.
Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate you.
Thanks so much for having me on the show.